What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh format video. And in this video, we're going to be showing off a bit more of Jar format, and specifically showing off the Burn versus Mill matchup, as it is a pretty bad matchup for Mill that does form one of the three sort of sides of the quote-unquote triangle of this format between Mill, Burn, and Good Stuff. But before we dive into the games, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. We're at just slightly over 430 subscribers at the time of making this video. And, my goal for this month has been to reach 500. Maybe it's a bit out of reach now as we need 69 more subscribers to actually make it there. But with your help, hopefully we will be able to get close. So definitely subscribe if you're not already. In addition, if you enjoy these videos, as always, please do leave a like down below. In addition, if you want to try out any of these formats for yourself, we have a Discord server, which is a great place to find games in these obscure formats, and it's just a great place to be, so definitely check it out. Link will be in the description down below. But with all that out of the way, let's discuss this mill deck. Now, if you missed my last video on this mill deck in Jar format, just know that it has improved greatly from the introduction of Morphing Jar. This deck is just insanely good at being able to cycle things like Morphing Jar, Hero's Shadow Scout, and Cyber Jar with something like Spear Cretin, going for big card destruction plays, and then recycling those card destructions with things like Magician of Faith, and just being generally all around annoying to deal with. It is very consistent due to things like Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest, and it also can be very good at stalling your opponent, not just through Spear Cretin, but also through things like Man-Eater Bug, which can just pop your opponent's powerful monsters and deprive them of resources. In terms of the spells, we of course have two card destructions, which can be great at just getting your opponent to deck out when they've got a huge hand filled up with something like a Cyber Jar or a Giant Trunade activated when your opponent has a full back row. But we're also playing these sort of powerful limited spells in this format: Change of Heart, Confiscation, Dark Hole, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, and Forceless Sentry. These are all very good in this deck, even though it's not the typical sort of aggro deck. And so these are the limited spells in the format that we are including. We also have two Swords of Revealing Light, which can just be great at stalling your opponent out, and also can be recycled through something like a Giant Trunade, just getting yourself a couple more turns of use out of these Swords of Revealing Light here. For the traps, we've got 3 Magic Jammer, which is great at stopping your opponent's major power spells, and also stopping things like Heavy Storm or Mystical Space Typhoon when you really don't want those to go through. We also have a Mirror Force, as it's just insanely good if you're able to pull it off, and we have 3 Waboku, as this can be chained to something like an opponent's Giant Trunade, Mystical Space Typhoon, or Heavy Storm, and it can be very good at stalling the game a bit, just buying you another turn where your opponent can't do battle damage to you. For the side deck, we have 2 Heavy Storm, 3 Mystical Space Typhoon, just to bump up the amount of spell and trap removal we have in case we're going up against the Burn matchup, which you'll see in this video. We also have a Painful Choice, which can be good to bring in if you know you're not facing against an opponent's mill deck, as Painful Choice is very good at increasing the consistency of this deck. But when your opponent is playing mill as well, it does get you 5 cards deeper into your deck, which can be very deadly in those situations. We also have 3 Tribute to the Doomed, also for the mill mirror match. This can be very good at sniping your opponent's set monsters that have very good flip effects. We also have 3 Seven Tools of the Bandit, 3 Solemn Judgment. These are sort of to go up against more counter trap heavy decks, although they aren't as good to bring in against something like Burn, which is extremely happy whenever we're lowering our life points. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. If you want a more sort of in-depth and detailed deck breakdown, you can check out my last video. But I think that this deck is overall pretty sick, even if I don't necessarily think it's the best deck in the format. And the reason why I don't think it is the best deck in the format will hopefully become clear in the games I'm going to show off today. So let's dive into those. Okay, we've got a game against Aratos here. We are on Mill. Unclear what they're on yet, although, as I've been saying, this is the Mill versus Burn matchup, so you probably know that they're on Burn. But Aratos is a great duelist in this format, and in all these old retro formats. Always a pleasure to have them on the channel. So let's dive in to the game and see how it goes. This is a pretty decent opener. Just having the Cyber Jar early, along with the Spear Cretin to recycle it, is incredibly good. And if we do ever need to stall, the swords can be nice as well. So we're just going to start off with a set Cyber Jar, set Swords of Revealing Light, pass back to them, and hopefully just, get them digging deeper into their deck right now, and hopefully get some good flip monsters off the Cyber Jar activation. They're going to activate Pot of Greed, drawing 2, which is very good. They're going to summon out a Witch, and they're going to actually Change of Heart our set, so they will know it's a Cyber Jar. They'll be able to get in for 1100 damage here. And then main 2, they are just going to flip it up, triggering it themselves, as that way they can sort of react to what they and we do draw. So the entire field will get popped here. They will get a search off that Witch. And they're going to banish 5 pretty good ones. We get some good ones as well, though. We get Forceful Sentry and Confiscation, so we will be able to dismantle their hand a little bit. And we do get a Man-Eater Bug and a Hero's Shadow Scout to potentially like flip up the bug, pop one of their monsters, and get some mills in with the Hero's Shadow Scout. But their mills are also extremely good. That Raigeki can just dismantle our board once it's set. And the Just Desserts can get in some fairly decent damage. The Prince of Tsurugi is not the best right here, as, you know, we've only got one spell and trap card in our back row, so it won't deal that much damage. But the Magician of Faith is very annoying because they can recycle that Raigeki. So all in all, quite an unfortunate sort of set of cards that they draw there. And they will just, you know, add those to hand so that way they can set them without us knowing which is which. We will do the same with our monsters here. And so we're just both going to set our whole fields. We'll add the Forceful Sentry, Waboku, and Confiscation here. They're going to add the Raigeki and Desserts. And they're going to set to activate Chain Energy and pass back to us. So it looks like they're not too worried about the Raigeki there. So they could have fired Raigeki now just to sort of clear our board, but it looks like they want to save it for more threatening monsters, which will enable us to potentially, you know, Confiscation or Forceful Sentry that out of their deck. So we're going to flip up Man-Eater Bug, try and pop the Magician of Faith. Unfortunately, we hit the tomato. So we're going to flip up this Swords of Revealing Light here, just to try and force them to add the pot to hand, as that's their... Well, I guess they could add the Change of Heart as well. We just want to force them to use the Magician of Faith now, so that way when we do our hand rips here, we'll be able to send whatever they get back to the deck. They're going to take the Change of Heart, which honestly I'm more fine with than them taking Pot of Greed. And we will flip up a Hero's Shadow Scout here just to mill them a little bit more. Unfortunately, they hit some very, very good ones here. Minar is a real problem for the mill deck, as its main win condition is through discarding. And if they've got 3 Minars in their deck, then that'll be 3,000 points of damage. That'll be pretty rough. And another Just Desserts is just incredibly brutal. So they will add all of those to hand. If we had a card destruction here, this could have been a good time to potentially use it, as they do have like 8 cards in hand, which is a fair amount. We will be taking 1,000 for the Minar, but it's still, you know, getting them deeper into their deck, I guess. We're going to activate a Forceful Sentry, and that will go through. So we get to see their whole hand here. And honestly, it's not the most threatening. The Princess of Tsurugi isn't really that important for us right now. Change of Heart is kind of annoying, so we might send that back. Desserts is also very annoying, as it can get them a ton of damage out of nowhere pretty easily. We could maybe even Forceful back the Minar, because that way it won't be discarded. But they've got so many ways to search it out with like a Sangan or a Witch. So I'm not really sure that's worth it. In the end, we will just send back Desserts because that's a lot of damage potentially on board. And we do have a Magic Jammer to deal with the Change of Heart here. So we're going to do that. We're going to go to the battle phase, just hit over that Magician of Faith. So that way they don't have like Cannon Soldier fodder if they're able to bring out that later. But we're just going to set 2. And then we're going to set the Spear Cretin, pass back to them. So this is 1,500 damage on board for Desserts, which is why we sent back their Desserts there. But we do know that they have another, and if they want to use it, they will just fire Raigeki here, so we're just going to Magic Jammer, discard the Confiscation, as that's just a little bit too much damage that we'd have to take in order to pull it off. They're going to set 1, and they're going to set another, and they're going to pass back to us. So, unclear what that set is, but we're just going to flip up this Spear Cretin here, switch our Bug and Scout back to the fence, and pass back to them. They're going to activate Delinquent Duo, so they will drop down 1,500 here, but they will be able to snipe 2 cards out of our hand, which is pretty good for them. So they're going to hit one of our Magicians of Faith, and we're going to discard a Sangan in addition to that. As the Sangan effectively represents 1,000 points of damage that we'd have to take through a Chain Energy, as we'd have to commit it to board, let it die, and then get another monster that we'd have to then commit to board. So we're going to discard that. We draw a Magic Jammer, which is pretty good. and we might consider actually setting that, but we do know that they do have a Princess Tsurugi, so we don't want to increase the amount of damage that we'll be taking here. So we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to set one, pass back to us, and Swords is expired now, so it will go to the grave. So this will only be 500 damage off the Tsurugi. We're going to pass back to them. They're going to pay 500, set one, pass back to us. We don't really feel the need to get aggressive or commit more to board here. You know, if they do manage to destroy the Spear Cretin, we can get back other monsters from our graveyard. So we're fine in that regard. And, you know, we've got this Waboku in case they do go for a big aggressive push otherwise. So we feel pretty fine just leaving the board as is and just forcing them to be the first one to commit here. They're just going to pass back to us. We draw. We're just going to pass back to them. They're going to activate another Chain Energy, which is pretty brutal. Makes us, you know, even less likely to commit something else to board. So we're just going to pass back to them, discard a Spear Cretin from our hand. They're going to discard a Mystic Tomato. We're going to discard this Morphing Jar, as we don't want them to pull off the Minar plays there. And they're going to discard a Giant Germ. We're going to discard a Hero Shadow Scout. They're going to draw. They're going to summon out Cannon Soldier, and this is extremely worrying, but we don't really have a way to stop this. So they're going to tribute off their Princess Tsurugi with priority. And then they're going to activate a Just Desserts, activate another Just Desserts, and they do have 1500 additional damage with the Cannon Soldier on board. So that will just be the end of game one. And I think that this game sort of shows how tough the burn matchup can really be, because if you just sort of let them do their thing because you don't really have any way to get aggressive, then they can just draw what they need to kill you. And unfortunately, that's what happened in game one there. And the mill deck doesn't really have a way to get more aggressive, at least not in the main deck. And in the side deck, we really just want to bring in the spell and trap removal. I know some people have been talking in the Discord about potentially siding in, like, you know, a beater with a Megamorph, because that can get a ton of damage, and against burn, you are likely to be lower in life points. But I just feel that's a bit too convoluted and a bit too bricky, and oftentimes burn will be able to set up a defensive wall as well. So, like, I don't really think it's that good, but it is an option that you can go for if you want to. It's just not the option that I'd prefer. I think another idea that I've heard that is a lot more promising is siding in Nimble Momongas, as that can get you some life points back. But honestly, burn doesn't even need to attack against mill, so it is a bit tough no matter what you side in. So it's very tricky, but Momongas are probably the way to go in the future there. But we do side in our spell and trap removal and hope that that will be enough. And we draw a Mystical Space Typhoon in the opener, which is pretty decent. We're going to set a Sangan, set the Mystical Space Typhoon, pass back to them. They're just going to set 3, set 4, and activate a Chain Energy, pass back to us. We're just going to activate the Mystical Space Typhoon in the end phase, popping that Chain Energy. We could have gone for one of the back row potentially, but we don't know what any of them are. So, you know, we'd have to get pretty lucky to hit something pretty good. And we're just going to draw a Waboku. We're going to flip up the Sangan and just attack into their set, see what it is. Unfortunately, it is a Cannon Soldier, so they will be able to rebuff our attack. We're going to set a Waboku, set a Swords, and we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to draw, switch the Cannon Soldier to attack into our Sangan. We'll take 4 here, and we do get a search, so we'll grab a Morphing Jar to hand. They're just going to set another, pass back to us. We draw Maneater Bug, which is pretty great. We'll just set that Maneater Bug, set this Dark Hole here, set this Card Destruction. We're trying to bluff that we did set the Morphing Jar there, just so that way they might play unoptimally here. They're just going to set 1 and attack into our Maneater Bug, so we will be able to pop that Cannon Soldier, and they'll pass back to us. We draw a Witch, which is an honestly great draw. We'll bring out the Witch and just attack in for 11 here, trying to get in some damage. And they're going to draw as well. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Sword of Revealing Light, which is pretty good at stalling out the game for a bit longer. But we're just going to fire off a Dark Hole here, just in case that's a nasty flip monster, and also because we do get a search with the Witch here. They're going to search out a Sangan, and we could potentially search out a Witch, which can get over the Sangan, but we're just going to search out a Sangan as well. This was maybe a mistake, because if they summon out Giant Germ and attack into our Sangan, then they'll be able to get in a lot of damage that way. But, you know, we go for this play, and they'd be able to do that anyways with, like, a Witch as well. They could just crash in for 15, so I don't really think it's that big of a deal. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw Magician of Faith, which can be good at getting back that Dark Hole later. And we're going to flip up this Sword of Revealing Light just to see what their set monster is. We see that's the Sangan, so we have no real need to attack into it because we won't be doing any damage to them. So we're just going to set this Magician of Faith, pass back to them. They're going to activate Tremendous Fire, which is a bit annoying as we do drop down 1,000 life points more. And then they're going to fire off this Chain Energy here, which is pretty rough. That's turn 1 on swords. We draw Morphing Jar, which is pretty nice. And so we are just going to set that, pass back to them. We could have potentially flipped up the Magician of Faith here to get back the Mystical Space Typhoon right away. But I don't really feel the need to do that, as we want to let them take some damage off the Chain Energy as well. They are indeed going to set 1 here, pass back to us. We draw Giant Tornado, which is a great draw here. So we're going to fire that Giant Tornado. They're going to fire the Just Desserts, just use it up and deplete their hand size by 1 in case we've got a card destruction here. And they're going to add their entire hand back, and we could potentially just win the game right here. We're going to switch this Sangan into attack over their Sangan, so they'll get a search. It will unfortunately be a Minar, but we do have a lot of potential discards here. We're going to fire this card destruction, discarding their entire hand away, and we hit some very good ones. We hit both of their board clears. Unfortunately, we do indeed hit 2 Minars as well, so they will be able to deal 2,000 damage to us there. Which is quite unfortunate, but we're still in this. Even if we discard 1 last Minar, then we're still feeling fine. We're going to add back a card destruction with this Magician of Faith, set the Raigeki, activate card destruction, and discard their entire hand yet again. Looks like we missed out on some Minars there, so we're pretty happy about that. And unfortunately, we don't draw a card destruction just yet here, but maybe off of this Morphing Jar we will. We could have potentially set the Waboku here, but we've already got a Waboku in our back row, and that would clog up our spell and trap card zones in case we do draw another card destruction. So we're going to discard their whole hand away. They'll draw 5. We draw 5 as well. Unfortunately, it isn't really enough to let us mill them to death here, but we can potentially do that next turn. We'll set a Magician of Faith, pass back to them, and they're going to activate Tornado. We'll chain a Waboku to that, so that way, you know, we won't take any damage here. They're going to activate Confiscation to potentially snipe something from our hand. They're going to snipe this Raigeki, which is a little bit unfortunate for us. They're going to set 1 and activate a Chain Energy here. So we are going to start by paying 500 and activating Heavy Storm, and you might be wondering, why didn't you activate Mystical Space Typhoon instead of Heavy Storm, as Mystical Space Typhoon is just 1-for-1 removal no matter what, whereas Heavy Storm could potentially be used to get rid of their entire back row all at once if they commit a bunch. And the reason for this is that they do know that we have the Heavy Storm, as they did Comfy us, and also Mystical Space Typhoon can be used to snipe something they Just Desserts in a way that they can't chain it to. So, given that we're at very low life points and Just Desserts will kill us here, we do think that the Heavy Storm is the better play to do. So we're just going to fire that off. We're going to flip up a Magician of Faith here, and a card destruction wouldn't be the best here, as, you know, they've only got 2 cards in hand. So instead, we're just going to go for a Raigeki, getting rid of their entire board, and attacking in for a ton of damage here. So we're going to attack in for 2,300. They'll drop down to 1,600, and I feel pretty good about this. Main Fates 2, we're just going to set a Maneater Bug, and we're actually going to activate 2 Swords of Revealing Light and set a Mystical Space Typhoon, passing back to them. And the reason for this is if they've got Heavy Storm, they could clear Swords of Revealing Light either way and potentially kill us that way. But if they don't have Heavy Storm, then they won't be able to Mystical Space Typhoon our only Swords of Revealing Light, and they might be able to attack in for game. So I figure that just committing all of our spells and trap cards to board is for the best, and we don't really have to worry about a Princess Tsurugi, as we do have the Maneater Bug to pop it. So I'm feeling fine about this. They're going to set 1, set another, pass back to us, and we will just, in their end phase, activate the Mystical Space Typhoon. And I'm very glad we did that, because it was Just Desserts, which would have just killed us. So, using the Heavy Storm earlier instead of the Mystical Space Typhoon is paying off here. And this will just be the end of the game. We're going to flip up this Maneater Bug here, and that will be all she wrote. So, you know, game 2, we were able to win against the burn deck, and we actually managed to do it through damage, although I think that if the game had gone on longer, we could have potentially done it just through mill, as we did manage to get them down pretty deep into their deck. The Minars were very annoying. It did drop us down dangerously low, but luckily we had enough life points that it didn't really make a difference in the end. And so, like, the burn versus mill match isn't completely unwinnable, especially after you sided in the spell and trap removal. And this is maybe an argument to, like, pre-side in some of the spell and trap removal in the main deck, just because you know that your matchup against burn is so bad. But, you know, that's sort of an idea to experiment with in the future. But for now, we'll go into game 3 and see if our spell and trap removal will enable us to win this game as well. We are going to go second here, unfortunately. So let's hope they don't have any good sort of hand rips here. And they do have Duo, which is a pretty good one. So they're going to be able to snipe some cards out of our hand. They'll snipe one of our True Nades, which is a bit unfortunate. Luckily, we do have another, though. And we got to think about what exactly to send here. So we're going to actually send the Spear Cretin, as we don't have any monsters in grave to get it back with. I mean, we could have sent the Morphing Jar and then sent the Spear Cretin to get it back that way, but that's kind of convoluted, and we might as well just, use the Morphing Jar as is. So they're going to set 2 and set a Maneater Bug, and they reveal that they've actually got 2 Chain Energy, which is extremely annoying here, as every one of our actions will cost us 1,000 life points to do. Luckily, we do draw Heavy Storm, so we're just going to pay the 1,000, fire the Heavy Storm, and we'll set this Morphing Jar, set this Waboku, set the True Nade, and pass back to them. Hopefully we can potentially get some good discards off them here. Unfortunately, they do have Maneater Bug, so they will be able to pop our Morphing Jar. They'll summon out a Mystic Tomato here. We'll take 1850. And main 2, they will activate another Chain Energy. So quite unfortunate. Luckily, we do have the True Nade in case we want to make a major play. But yeah, just kind of rough. We're going to pay the 5, summon out Sangan, attack in to the Maneater Bug here to get in some damage on them, and also just clear another monster that they can attack with or tribute off for a Cannon Soldier. So we're just going to do that, pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Sangan of their own and attack in for a fair amount of damage here. We'll let it go through. We will get a Cyber Jar here to clear that Mystic Tomato, and they're going to attack in for 1,000 with the Sangan. They're going to pass back to us. We draw Dark Hole, but we don't really feel the need to use it yet. So we're just going to set this Cyber Jar here, pass back to them. And they're going to attack in with their Mystic Tomato. That'll clear the board, and we'll get some pretty good hits off that, and 2 Wabokus as well. But they will also get some pretty good hits. That Just Desserts can be very annoying, dealing us 1,500 points of damage. Comfy can snipe out like the Dark Hole from our hand. True Nade can let them potentially force us to reset under Chain Energy, which is annoying. And Magic Jammer can give them some insulation. So all in all, this is pretty annoying. But we will be able to set a full board of monsters in a way that dodges around the life point cost for Chain Energy. So, that's a bit of an upside here. And they're going to bring out their Witch, add the True Nade, Just Desserts, and Comfy and Jammer to hand. We will add the 2 Wabokus here. And they're just going to attack into one of our sets, probably trying to hit the Maneater Bug so that way we'll use it up. And indeed we will use it up, but we're not actually going to use it on their monster here. We're actually going to pop one of our own. We're going to pop the Witch, because this way we do get a search off of this, and also we do dodge a bit around the Just Desserts damage, as 1,500 is a lot when we're only at 2,750 and they've got a Chain Energy up. So we're going to add a Morphing Jar to hand. Not really much we can add here that actually makes a difference. They're going to activate True Nade, so we will be forced to send back our entire hand here. They're going to Confiscation and send the True Nade to grave, which makes sense, as this way we will have to pay for the Chain Energies. They're going to set 3, set another, and activate Chain Energy, pass back to us. And we draw a Witch, which is okay, but not the best here. We might actually want to flip up the Spear Cretin and activate Dark Hole, but the issue is if we do that, then they can just get back a Maneater Bug and pop whatever we get back. So no matter what we do with the Spear Cretin, we don't want to trigger it on our turn, as they'll just be able to deal with whatever we bring out. So we're just going to think about this for a bit, and we're just going to pay 5, set a Waboku, pass back to them. They're going to pass back to us, as they realize, just as we do, that if they trigger the Spear Cretin on their turn, then we'll be able to get something good, but they won't necessarily be able to get something good here. And we're just going to keep passing back to them. They're going to set another, pass back to us. We draw Pot of Greed, which we could potentially use here. It could potentially draw us into something like a True Nade or a Heavy Storm, but we're at such low life points that Pot of Greed represents basically 1,000 points of damage, and we don't really want to take that here. So we're just going to discard a Waboku, pass back to them. They're going to pass back to us. We draw Swords, which isn't the best right now. So we'll just pass back to them, discarding a Morphing Jar. We're just trying to hard draw into the spell and trap removal. Unfortunately, that Tremendous Fire probably will do it here. They're going to pay 5, but we take 1,000. And maybe in response to the Tremendous Fire, I should have chained a Waboku, just in case they had some Princess of Tsurugis here. but honestly, I don't really think it would have made a difference. They're going to flip up a Prince of Tsurugi. We know they've got a Just Desserts, so this will just be the end of the game. So, we did actually manage to win a game against the Burn deck, but that's a very rare occurrence most of the time. The Burn deck is just so well equipped against this Mill matchup. Having the Minars to basically nullify the Mill deck's win condition, and also just having so many ways to deal sudden damage. It's just a very tough deck to go against. It can win some games, but that's not generally the norm. In my next video, I'm planning on showing off how Burn does against the Good Stuff aggro deck, as that is sort of like the last leg of the triangle. But I do think that Burn probably is the best deck in the format just because it has such a good mill matchup. And spoiler alert for the next video, it has a pretty decent Good Stuff aggro matchup as well. So because, the format is basically formed around this triangle, I'm not planning on spending much more time in it after that. My next video will probably be my last video on this format. And then we'll be diving into the next format, which will be PSV format, which should be pretty fun as it introduces a lot of new cards to the card pool. But since we're in jar format now, what do you all think of this format? And what do you all think of this matchup? Do you think that I'm sort of overselling the ability of the Burn deck to just basically curb stomp Mill? Or do you think that the Burn deck is basically unbeatable? Do you have any ideas for what Mill can put in the side deck to potentially sort of make this matchup a little bit better for it? Please let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.